Hi, my name is Jason Impey and I'm an independent filmmaker. I'm a British filmmaker that's been doing it for a few decades now because I started really young. I started making films when I was literally 10 years old by being very enthusiastic, picking my dad's camcorder up, getting a group of friends together, shooting what I thought was going to be an epic film, a remake of the film Split Second. It ended up being like a 10-minute film, which I was like in my head had worked out it was going to be 3 hours long, and I was actually pretty disappointed and somewhat pissed off with the result. I got my dad to edit it on the VCR by plugging the camera in, and yeah, it was. I've still got it. It knocks around, but it was actually a disappointment. But that was my introduction as a filmmaker into the world. I just grew up at a young age, literally from the age of 5, watching a few horror films a bit sneakily on the sly, and kind of one, enjoying it and loving it, two, interested in why and how it was made, and my interest ran deeper than just your average Joe going, oh, this is a cool horror film. I was really into it, and I was really into specific shots, cinematography kind of interested me. Being young at that age, it didn't really register, but I was very intrigued in how things were shot and why they used certain shots and stuff. So that obviously just grew and grew. So by the time I was finishing school, I was straight out the door into college to study film, because I just, I was making amateur films as a kid and naturally progressed into studying it, which, there is the argument, is studying worth it, or do you just make films? I'm a bit of both. I think it's good to study a bit to enhance your understanding and broaden your horizons, and open your mind to it, which I'll come back to in a second. And then obviously doing stuff, I was active while I was studying. I was also making student films and being a part of it, so that's also really important, because I've learned a lot about filmmaking through making films rather than just studying and discussing. Actually, trial and error is a learning curve, especially in underground filmmaking. But studying, I went out of my way to do as much as I can. So I studied, I did film appreciation on the side. I joined a free production company to do training videos with the college. So I was just literally absorbing everything to do with film that I could. And through doing film appreciation, it did open my eyes to even a bigger world of underground film that at the young age didn't quite realise was out there. I mean, when I started out, the world was a different place. There was not like social networking and like this whole internet like lifestyle of blogs everywhere, and it was very different. It was a much more enclosed community. I think it was harder for indie filmmakers to be aware of one another and what actually was out there, outside of like mainstream and so-called high-end independent films. So I think the world now has made it a lot easier. But British independent film, my introductions to it, when you say British independent films, looking back when I was young, you can't think of many. What springs to mind is Jake West stuff, Razorblade Smile, films of Eileen Daly, in which I've had the privilege to go on and actually be friends with her and work with her on stuff. But a lot of films that I grew up with and influences weren't necessarily British cinema, British underground films. I can't think off the top of my head of many of those back in the day. I've discovered more as I've got older and it's been open to me, and I did grow up loving them. But as I say, it was a locked off world to me. Like there weren't, that. Where I lived, I grew up in, I live in Milton Keynes and grew up in Milton Keynes. There wasn't really many conventions around me or near me. We certainly don't have things like art house cinemas or festivals or anything in this region either. So actually, I'm a bit closed off from it, which was frustrating and is frustrating to this day, because even now I still think is a bit of we've had a few conventions, but they've been and gone. They've been booted out through various political reasons. So we're quite isolated up these neck of the woods from it, which is sad. I don't live far from London, but I hate London. I'm not a massive fan of the place, so it's not great. But my influence was like German underground cinema was more open to me. It was more known, and the splatter field. So I made a film called Sick Bastard, which is almost like the English version of German's violent shit. That was my contribution, early British cinema, which is probably one of the things that I kind of ended up getting more known for, if I'm honest. But I used to really I used to go on the hunt, car boot sales. I used to go to car boot sales as a kid with my grandparents and hunt out VHSs and try and find the most craziest looking thing I could and watch all them. That was I kind of self-taught myself in the early days of like films, and used to pick some crazy stuff up there. Used to try and record dodgy stuff off the TV, set up the VCR on timer, record stuff early hours of the morning, and I tried to watch what I could when I couldn't get my hands on what I could and how I could. But again, it was reliant on flea markets and car boot sales, and when I went to college. It was the first time when I was 16 that I was surrounded by like-minded people who were also into film and had the same passion, which was exciting, but also meant some of these people had access to like VHSs of banned stuff or not so well released stuff, and I was able to borrow and see things that I was reading about or wanted to see or had heard about, but was actually able to finally like watch this stuff, and yeah, it just excited me even more and enhanced it even more. So the more I went into the indie underground sector, I more I had an appreciation and loved it. I loved the fact that they took risks and they weren't non-conventional. They were controversial. They tackled taboo subjects. They didn't shy away. They were almost free from producers locking them into, there's not producers going, you can't do that, or we need to sell loads of tickets, or you need to appeal to this audience. They were a little bit free to be expressive and more creative, and be a badass flick. Digital and physical media, that's a long old debate that. I am a collector and I love physical media. I love having something in my hand. I love seeing the artwork. I love the extras. I love the whole package. I've literally collected films since I was a kid. Again, the tender age of 5, I had my first VHS brought free from my granddad of the film I saw at the cinema, and I literally have been collecting films ever since I was 5. So I have like tons of VHS all boxed up because I can't fit them anywhere. Naturally, I went into DVD, onto Blu-ray, even on 4K UHD disc now. I'm a very physical media person. I love it. Digital is quite convenient. I must admit, when it was first coming in, I was a bit, the idea of just a file in the cloud weren't over appealing to me, but the convenience of it and reaching a further audience is good. As a filmmaker, it's opened up great doors now, like Amazon Prime and Vimeo and video on demand platforms have actually made it possible to get your work out to a much wider audience and actually get a little bit of a return, money back, which indie filmmakers struggle horrendously with money, and VOD has actually seen a bit of a return, so that's actually quite amazing to me. And as I say, it's cheap and easy to get your work out there, because I do hate making a film and it not getting released, or it just being forgotten or disregarded or shoved in the closet, so to speak. And I've worked on a fair few projects which have not seen the light of day, unfortunately, and it really does bother me when a film's like hidden for various reasons. So the fact that this digital era, you can make a film and you can get it out to the masses, is really appealing. However, a lot of people I know, and I know what the kind of audience for these sort of films are, do like a physical release. Fortunately, I've been able to do physical releases as well through distributors and that, but I must say it's not as rewarding on a financial basis, but it is more rewarding on the cast and crew seeing this end product, and it's great having the shelf of your films there, and obviously other films that I love and collect. It's great having the collections there in a library, but it takes up a lot of space. It's something else I battle with. Discs and DVDs and videos everywhere is hard to cope with sometimes, but in the life of a filmmaker, not that the family approve, but I do prefer physical, and I'll always stand by it, but I know it's niche, and to be honest, the way the future's going, I never thought I'd say it or see the day, but I can see digital creeping in and taking over a bit, which is a shame, but there's pros and cons to both. So as long as you can still get cool releases for the niche markets like yourselves and me, then it's all good. It's all good. I like the best of both. Blending old school techniques with new school techniques. Well, I I'm not a massive fan of CGI and films reliant on computer generated images. I do like raw, rough filmmaking, especially obviously being an indie filmmaker and being into the underground scene. Um, and so obviously I like using all the old school techniques such as old practical effects. You know, an old practical effect looks so much better than CGI and is more realistic. You know, there's physically something there. It's easier for your cast and crew to work with. It's more practical and realistic to do. It's cheaper to do. There's less issues unless you're on like a budget. CGI is kind of out there. I mean, I've delved and you can achieve it on small scale, but it's not always a great thing to do. I certainly don't really like relying on stuff. I hate the whole fix it in post or do it in post scenario. I like to be a raw filmmaker and grab stuff. However, over the years, I have grown to embrace and accept the new ways more because, to be fair, they've made it possible to do things you wouldn't be able to do before. As for formats, I love film. Like, I used to shoot on Super 8 and I've shot 16mm as well as VHS and all the old analog stuff. I love it, but film is just so expensive to shoot on now. It makes it not really practical for an indie filmmaker on a budget to go down that route. I know there's obviously a trend now of trashing footage in post to make it look throwback, which it can work better than working with like old technology. I have delved in everything as a filmmaker, to be honest. I've had a go at anything and everything because I just love the whole world of films. But shooting on old VHS and stuff, I've done it, and actually it's quite an unpleasant experience because it's hard to handle that material after you've shot it, because the way the world's gone with editing and digital editing and that, it's not the most user friendly thing to do, is shoot on old technology to then edit on new technology now, and editing on old technology. Like, I used to have an old analog system and this Casablanca unit, and we're back in the student films we were doing the old lever editing and dubbing the VHSs. I mean, I went back to have a go at that years ago when I did my film Sick Bastard that I mentioned, and that was horrendous. I don't know how I used to edit analog. It was painstaking. So I ended up transferring all the footage that I'd shot on VHS to digital, only to reload it into a digital editing suite and cut it that way. It was just much more realistic to do. But the time and the process of messing around from VHS to getting it to a DVD release was horrendous. So realistically, but it looks good. I must say, it does look like an old 80s VHS throwback, which is what I was going for. And it looks, you can never make any effect or whatever you throw and filters and grades and that, you're still never going to get that true VHS look unless you really do go on VHS. So I am glad I did it. Would I do it again? No, probably. Hell no. I've lived it and done it. I'd much more go on the route of using the digital kit. I mean, again, I'm a different case than some filmmakers because obviously my living is filmmaking. I am a freelancer and run a business of filmmaking and film and edit all kinds of weird and wonderful videos, which allows me to have equipment. So I have access to this kit. So for me, I have the kit, it makes sense to use it, and then, do as I will. Other filmmakers are in different situations, will have a different look on that. I love old school techniques, but I suppose I did have a fence up, but I have started to embrace the new ways a bit more. It makes more sense now. And you just know, I loved the old 80s and 90s of filmmaking, but those days have gone, unfortunately. And there are a few throwback films I see that remind me of them, and I do like all the nods, but it's never going to be how it was, and sometimes the harder you try to recapture it, sometimes it just backfires. I think it's nice to play around with new and old techniques and make them work together as a hybrid as best you can, and just work with what you've got and do the best you can, and come up with something new, fresh and unique, and hope for the best. Really, it's a tough one. Distribution, a very controversial subject matter amongst indie filmmakers. I know a lot of indie filmmakers have had a lot of trouble and arguments and fallouts regarding distribution, and I know it's a sore subject and area. I myself have had many features and shorts and anthologies and all kinds of things distributed with various distributors, and I've had buyouts, I've had royalty shares, I've had physical, I've had digital, I've self-distributed. So I've had a roller coaster of a ride with it, and I am quite experienced in it because I have been dealing with distributors for the better part of 10 years, and there are some horror stories, there's some good stories. I know the general vibe out there is distributors, dare I say, can be a rip-off, and you can get stung and ripped apart. I did kind of have those feelings for a while. I've been there where I've felt hard done by, where I've spent a lot of money on a film. I've had to do all kinds of things and jump through ridiculous hoops to get it to a distributor and to a finished stage, and only to be, hit with all kinds of weird and wonderful crap afterwards, and get the sorrowful news that it's not done great, or there's you've done all right but bad returns. But having worked more in the industry over the years and been more hands-on in that side of things, I've seen some worrying things that actually made me realise it's not all as black and white as I was always out there thinking, like with other filmmakers. I think indie film, if film in general is having a hard time with distribution, with physical at least, so indie film is having a horrendously hard time. I do think people are very quick to be like, oh, bloody distributors is crap, but there's you have got to be very careful. But I would say self-distribution has been very rewarding, to control everything, but really hard work, because you're limited on your advertising, you're pushing it out there, and if you're self-doing discs, that's horrendous, the expenses and the hassle. I've done a bit of that. This is where the digital era comes in. Digital, yeah, self-distributing, no other choice, mate. Like, you can release your stuff digitally, you can control it all, the returns are better, there's not much overheads. That is actually a blessing, it's amazing, I love it, I really do love it. But again, I'm disappointed that it's only digital. So when it comes to physical, nice artwork, boxed up edition, then to me, as I kind of have to go down the distributor route. So if I'm honest, I'm on the fence. I'm a bit of both. I like working with distributors to get a proper good release, but then if it's digitally, then I'm more inclined to self-distribute and do it myself. So over the years, I've started to do a bit of both. But I must admit, for the first half of my filmmaking career, I was definitely dealing with distributors only, not really self-distributing. Self-distribution is more of a newer thing to me, but over the years with digital, I've seen a massive difference, and it's been a positive difference, and I've actually managed to recoup money back from all the investments I've made growing up making these films, because over the last 15 years I've spent a lot of money making movies. I've invested a lot, and it's not always paid off, but years later it's harder to make films now, but I'm seeing a return from what I did when I was younger. But unfortunately, it is harder to do now. I found it a lot harder to do. I wished I was able to do a lot more. I used to be very prolific, but I'm still hanging in there doing bits. But life has thrown a lot more challenges my way. Growing up, more commitments. Actually making money as a freelance filmmaker is hard in its own right. So sometimes the odds are against me. So as I was saying, being a low budget filmmaker, making low budget movies are very there's a lot of constraints. My advice is my advice is to have a go if you're really passionate. You've got to really love film and be into it to make a film, if I'm honest, because making a film is really hard work, and I think people have got to realise that it's hard, but it can be very fun and very rewarding and very good. But I think only if you really enjoy it and get that out of it. If it's a bit of a half-assed thing, then I think you've got to think hard about if you want to do it. But I think don't expect too much. Don't get yourself thinking, I'm going to make a really good film, it's going to do really well, because then you've got to live with disappointment, because it's really hard making a film in general. Making a crap film's hard, so making a really good film's extra hard. So I think just have fun, play around with techniques, find your own feet. Everyone's got their own style. There's not always a right or wrong way making a film. Film is a form of art, and art is expressing yourself. So I do encourage people to have a go making a film, but I think that, you shouldn't get yourself too psyched up about it. Just find your feet. Don't run before you can walk. I certainly wouldn't go, let's go and make a 2-hour epic film if I've not even made a short film. I think you kind of got to experiment and find your feet a little bit. But it's easier to make a film than ever these days as well, because smartphones have wicked cameras on them. Technology is more accessible, it's easier to do. With that, there's a lot more competition, and you're like a small fish in a big pond, more so than ever now. But it is possible to make something, and with the internet and like websites and social media and YouTubes and all these things, it's also very possible to get your film seen and shown as well. So, it's changed a lot since I started, and it's actually more exciting than ever, the fact that I can go and shoot something, get it out there, and, it's great. But, obviously, again, pros and cons, as with everything in filmmaking, with the good comes the bad, and with the bad comes the good. So, but, definitely find your own style, and just have fun. Try not to let it consume you and get into the dark phase, which, a lot of filmmakers have had to ride out. Try not to fall into that trap. I do really like to push the envelope with filmmaking, because I'm attracted to dark, controversial subject matters in my storytelling, and that helps for indie film, because indie film is hard to stand out. So to stand out is to do something very taboo and controversial, and something from the macabre, and go down that dark route. Fortunately, that appeals to me. I have tried to push the envelope years ago when I did some films. I really went as far as I could to do controversial shots and scenes and subject matters, and it has worked, because it has got those films recognition. It's made them stand out. People have sourced them out and seeked me out, and it definitely left its impact. And yes, it has actually enabled me to get like this fan base, which have been very nice to me. I've had some very supportive and loyal people over the years that have grown to be fans of my work, and helped push stuff out, and it's really rewarding and touching. I'm very thankful for that, and it does actually mean a lot. It makes it so much more worthwhile when you realise there are people that enjoy your work and support it, and that has been through pushing the boundaries of filmmaking and doing like controversial things. I think it's really hard to do now, because there's so many indie films out there, especially in Britain. British indie film is there's loads going on, more so than ever. But that means there's a lot of great filmmakers and crazy filmmakers out there doing some really crazy stuff. And it's hard to compete sometimes, because some of the stuff out there is like mind-blowing. But I am pleased with what I've achieved, and I think I've gave my 2 cents worth into that. I must admit, I think when I was younger, because I started out very young, I probably did some quite ridiculous scenarios and scenes. And looking back at my work, it's always cringy to look back at your own work, but I probably did some immature scenes and some silly things. If I was to do them now, I'd probably do them different. And I must admit, I have started to mature as a filmmaker. It's took many years, but I haven't fully changed, but I have matured and changed a bit, and I am much more... My style, I've found, is I'm into my cinematography, the visual look of things, the lighting and the storytelling, and starting to create something. So I've evolved. I still love my roots, but I can feel it myself, has evolved in what interests me and what I like to get out of a film. But I like to push hard content in a film, but I like to do it in a very controlled, fun way. Some of my earlier works are like smash in your face, this is taboo, this is crazy shit. That's it's developed from there. But I love what I have achieved, and I don't regret anything I've done. I love all the films I take pride out of all the films I've made, even the really crap films that I can't stand and think they're really a pile of shit. I'm still glad I did them. I still got something out of it. I still learned something out of it, and it still did something for me and the audience. So, it's all good. I've gone through some dark times, but I sit here pretty chuffed with what I've achieved and look at it as a positive thing, really. And I still embrace and enjoy filmmaking as much as I did as that 5-year-old boy discovering crazy horror films. Well, do I prefer acting or being production behind the camera? I've only ever really acted because I had no choice. When I started making films, I could rely on myself. I didn't have to tell myself off. I didn't have to pay myself. I just thought, right, I'll put myself in the film because I can control it. To the point where I would even set up my own shots and film my bloody self, because it was hard to get people. Limited resources and time and money and all these things made it so that it made sense at the time. I shot myself in the foot because I did some crazy acting parts, because I used to give myself the hard roles because at least I know I could feel that. That ended up people wanting me in their films. I ended up getting involved in indie films, in British indie films as an actor, but I do not sell myself as an actor. I do not enjoy acting that much. I am so much more a filmmaker and behind the camera person. Acting is something that had to be done, and I've done it in the past. I very try not to do it. I do the odd cameo and I'll have a bit of fun doing that, but I really try to be a filmmaker and behind the camera person, not in front of the camera at all. I'm more of a technical filmmaker as well. They say there's two kinds of filmmakers, your performance director or your technical director. I am really interested in performance. I like working with it, but growing up being into visual images and cinematography, I do veer towards the technical side, which is not always great for the actors, but I just can't help myself. I'm very into my behind the camera operating, and I'm a bit of an all-rounder because I freelance in filming and editing, and I can do it myself and understand the processes. I do like to edit and control my own work. And not that I'm a control freak, I've got my own way of things, my own style, the own way I work. I do like my own edits. I do like collaborating, and I have done it. And I've had all kinds of journeys with it, but there's nothing like sitting there with your own work and editing your own work. And although I enjoy filmmaking, being on set and being on a shoot can be a battleground. It can be a war zone. There are many stories of war zones on shoots I've been on, so there's nothing like escaping it all, sitting in the nice quiet edit suite with your footage and relaxing with an edit. I enjoy editing, and it's very time consuming. It can take a long time. It can be very stressful, but I do like sitting there out of the way of all the hassle and just getting on with your footage. And if it's your own film, you should be able to get on with it. Although I have even been pestered for my own films to be finished and released, so not always escape that. But it's making the editing side is so much better than being in front of the camera. Let's put it that way.